right. Can you get Pierre in here? All right. Okay. Let's get Pierre in here. Oh, there we go.
Hey, let me make sure that I'm connected. Okay,
Okay. I think we got you now.
hello again.
Hey,
Yeah, how's it going?
good. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm in New Digs today.
Oh
I
yeah, you're in Houston.
I am. I'm visiting my niece and nephew and brother, sister-in-law, parents. So I'm in the kids' room at the moment. You
Nice,
can
nice.
here. I'll share a little bit of little taste. I'm surrounded by frozen paraphernalia
Nice.
and yeah, and this is kind of Uncle P's spot for calls. So yeah,
Well, well, I appreciate you joining while on vacation, I guess.
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
This is great.
but yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, so let's kick it off. So I know you and I have been chatting offline, and obviously looking at new ways of having these conversations. And one of the things I've been reading a lot about, amongst other things, is Stoicism and kind of understanding how we can apply that in our current lives and how that could apply to modern masculinity. But I guess for people that are watching this or will watch this later, that are not familiar with what Stoicism is and who the Stoics were, do you want to kind of share your thoughts
Yeah,
uh,
sure.
and then I'll
Uh,
add a little bit
yeah,
later as well. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm happy to. I'm gonna apologize for moving around a little bit here. But I think so. Stoicism as a philosophy has um, been around for some time since I guess the third or fourth century BC. Um, but the philosophy itself is different from the sort of modern concept of being stoic. And so it was a philosophy started by the Greeks and expanded upon by the Romans. Um, Common names that you might hear in the history books are Epictetus, Seneca, and then I think probably Marcus Aurelius's Meditations feel like the commonly cited um, source of a lot of Stoic philosophy. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's been expanded upon a fair bit in the
Yes.
modern age by folks like Tim Ferriss and especially Ryan Holiday. Really, a philosophy that is geared toward establishing virtues and values that feel important to oneself, recognizing our own or our own mortality, but
Yeah.
are being a small part of a very large system of the way of the world. And so some of the core tenets of Stoicism involve community, self-awareness, recognizing what one can change and what one cannot,
Yeah.
an action orientation. So it's not sort of the kind of armchair philosophy sort of approach. There's a definite focus on going out into the world, acknowledging the goods, the values with which you want to live, and carrying them out, surrounding yourself by people or with people who are going to build you up and you them, not worrying too much for the future, recognizing a lot of our experience of life is in our own take, our own sort of personal perspective on a situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's so hey Nate, welcome back. So
Innate
yeah, so I think
cancer geek.
there's an aspect of wisdom that comes into it as well, and I think with anything, from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, in the modern kind of world, it gets misinterpreted. And one of the things that I find get misinterpreted about Stoicism is that there was this aspect of not really recognizing our emotions, putting them aside and moving on. And I don't think that's what they meant. It was understanding that, yeah, and it's kind of what we want to preach today as well. And that's why I felt like, having this conversation around the Stoics and modern masculinity is so relevant, because I think even back then they felt it was important to recognize our emotions, but don't let yourself be consumed by your emotions, right? And I think one of the biggest learnings I took when kind of, what really inspired this for me was the meditations by Marcus Aurelius that you alluded to, was understanding that, our fellow man is going to do things. We all kind of have our own purpose. We all kind of have our own way of doing things, our own wisdom, our own path, but not letting that impact us and throwing us off. And so I think that's kind of more of a pragmatic way of looking at it from my perspective.
Yeah.
But we could kind of maybe build on some themes from here on. And I think one of the things personally for me, anger has been one of those things that I think personally I've struggled with, in not so much like, well, I think anger has really been a struggle in terms of how I'm able to express the emotions, and often I'll get angry, not so much about what has happened. You know what I mean? It's not the situation that's making me angry. It's how I feel about it, and how I'm not able to express myself. And I think one of the biggest things I took out of it was, anger is also, like, I think for men, we try to look at anger as a masculine kind of trait. But one of the things I took out of meditations or the work Marcus Aurelius put together was, we are also being weak when we let anger consume us. We're letting it control us and take power over us. And that is also a form of weakness when you really reframe it, and understanding why you're angry to begin with, rather than just letting it consume you. So I don't know. That was kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about, in addition to other things, but we just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah. It strikes me as central to this core tenet of recognizing what is happening within you, what you can change within particular circumstances, what you cannot, and in many cases, our own perspectives are the only things we can shift. There's common reference to how energetically draining time consuming, time wasting it is to fret over things that haven't happened and also try to control and change things for which we have no power to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware too that in just thinking about how Stoicism impacts modern masculinity, or how we define modern masculinity, and looking at Stoicism taking a part in that,
Mm-hmm.
um, that in many cases, even just acknowledging what we're feeling in a moment might be a challenge. But getting angry um, doesn't feel so contrary to traditional norms of masculinity, and so it's okay. And so
Yeah.
often that's the recourse that we've got, rather than defining, feeling, naming, working through a particular emotion, and recognizing what we might need, what we can change. I feel like this happens frequently for me, feelings of getting angry. Even yesterday, I was um, going to dinner with um, my some like hodgepodge of family members, and there was a miscommunication. It was really on me, um, but it led most of us to drive like 30 or 45 minutes out of the way to get to basically the wrong restaurant. And I realized we got to the wrong restaurant a little bit late, and then we got there and recognized we were in the wrong place and needed to backtrack another 30 or 45 minutes. Um, and my first inclination was to sort of get really pissed initially
Mm-hmm.
at like um, the other party involved in the miscommunication, which at that point was my dad. But I also recognized my own experience in it, and I couldn't change anything. It couldn't sort of move us more quickly to the location. I could only acknowledge what was mine and apologize. Probably
Mm-hmm.
recognize too what I needed in that moment was
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of connection, um, some food. I
Yeah.
was pretty hangry at that point, and so
Yeah.
there is an element of just recognizing what you can change and what you can control, and frankly, what you can't.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and thank you for sharing that, and kind of taking that ownership, because that's huge. I think for me, when I've been able to take ownership in situations where I've let my anger get the best of me, that is when I'm able to really make change. So, I
Hmm.
appreciate you changing. I'm wondering if you were more angry about driving around in Houston, because
Oh my, yeah, driving around
that's
in Houston
yeah,
is not fun.
yeah, exactly.
Not at all. It's such a pain in the butt.
Yeah,
And
so
like it was, yeah, it wasn't pleasant all around.
exactly.
And
No,
that is
so
something I absolutely cannot change.
no, exactly.
If I could,
Um,
I would.
yeah, so Nate's added here, being able to take that anger and shift that energy into positive action. I agree with that. I think I've really benefited when I've done that, is really when I'm in those angry moments, whether it's with myself or someone else. I'm like, how can I channel this into something positive? And obviously, that's harder. It's always hard to do that, and sometimes you let yourself slip. But most of the time, if you're able to really take that pause and shift your energy or your perspective, it is positive. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Nate. Any thoughts on that, Pierre?
Yeah, I think it's big. Uh, and uh, I'm aware to uh, how big an energy, sort of like in maybe absolute terms, how much energy is taken up by anger, and shifting such a large amount of focus, time, awareness, energy into something that feels helpful, um, may or positive in some way, however you may regard that,
Mm-hmm.
might well exceed the usual good that you can bring into the world. It's sort of like feeling an immense amount of sadness or aloneness, and then channeling that into gratitude or into generosity to other people. There's just
Mm-hmm.
just an intense amount that you can often bring and transform that is both to transformation to for other people, but largely for oneself.
Yeah.
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 And I think a lot
Absolutely.
of that is, and it is sort of rooted in much of Stoicism. A lot of that is um, being very clear on your intentions and your values and acting with intention. There is
Mm-hmm.
such an action orientation to the construct of Stoicism as a philosophy, and I think that's often why it sort of draws um, attention, awareness um, to men.
Yep.
Men get really intrigued by it, um, and there are increasingly there are sources um, to kind of build upon Stoic philosophy that speaks to men and women both, but really has there's something about it that speaks to the modern man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's really built on virtue ethics, right? So I think
Yeah,
to your point, it can apply to any gender. And just to kind of shift things a little bit, one of the other things I got out of kind of reading through it was really this whole notion that, especially when we feel we've been wronged or we've been mistreated, we start feeling like, okay, we're in the right and this person wronged us. And one of the things was, and you've touched on it earlier too, is really shifting our perspective and not letting, the universe is going to follow its course, but understanding that maybe our perspective is very subjective. We've got our blinders on. We're not seeing everything. And how can we decide that what someone else is doing is wrong? Um, they're probably on their own path, just like we're on our own path. And they may look at us saying, oh, this guy's wrong, right? So I think just having that humility can not only give you compassion for other people, but it also doesn't bring you into that anger where you're thinking that, oh, I've been wronged.
yeah,
So I don't know, like thoughts on that.
yeah. Well, it sort of it goes back to this um, the not wasting any time on the experiences or the opinions of others, as they do not necessarily relate to how you show up in your own world.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And so much, I mean, it's interesting because so much of the writings, at least by Marcus Aurelius, are, they're so fixated. He's so fixated in meditations on just like the clock ticking in our lives, which
yeah.
is really remarkable. Um, and we say, and we see and we read and we say things about treating each day as though it were our last, and yet it's obviously hard to do. There's a self-preservative element in the way that we live,
Hmm.
but there really is this extra reminder that uh, we will be dead. You will be dead. The viewers here and watching will all die.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the memory of this conversation will also die. And so
Right.
there is a sort of recognition too that from a pragmatic standpoint, you're sort of wasting your time if you're focused excessively on what someone else is thinking about you. If that
Hmm.
person isn't necessarily very close to you, or doesn't change who you are or what you do.
Hmm.
Um, it's sort of like shifting energy into, again, into what you can effect, as opposed to um, what the experiences are of other people and
Hmm.
comparisons. There's also
Hmm.
this sort of like innate, this through line of connectedness, that we're all made of the same stuff, or the same we're part of a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Um, what I'm capable of, you're capable of, and vice versa. Um, and also this distinction between how I spend my time and how I uh, spend my time doing my own stuff versus how I spend my time thinking about what other people around me might be saying about me or doing in comparison to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And that kind of goes along with what Nate's put there in terms of not squandering our energy. I think, and you touched on it too, like that piece of mortality. And one of the biggest, like, I think I'm going to paraphrase in terms of what Marcus Aurelius said was, the person that's going to live the longest and the person that's going to die tomorrow are both losing the same thing, and that's the present time, right? And
Yeah.
again, it's easier said than done, but I think living in that present does bring that peace and enlightenment in your life. And I think Buddhism kind of touches on that too. And being in the present, really going back to your point, is focusing on, yeah, like not letting other people's experiences and thoughts or opinions about us let us deviate from whatever path we're on, right? Whatever purpose we have. But yeah, so I think that all makes sense, and I think I see, pragmatically, you can see the applications in our today's world and around the theme of modern masculinity.
Yeah. And Furkan, I'm curious about how you stay present. Yeah.
That's a
That's a
challenge
tough
in
one.
itself, and I feel like with technology and everything at our fingertips, it gets harder and harder day by day. But I think um, it's the little things, like, again, trying to take it one step at a time and not being
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm just going to completely remove social media from my life or get rid of my smartphone. Because I mean, that's not realistic either. But I find like one of the things I try to do is when I'm around people that I enjoy spending time with. So that's the first thing I do, is prioritizing time with people that I actually enjoy spending time with. People that I'm learning from or I'm able to share something with. So in those moments, I can, kind of disconnect myself, not look at my phone, but just be present and have those conversations. And I think that's, again, that is a challenge, but that's
It's an
something
art.
yeah, yeah, it's something I aspire to do. Or when I'm reading a book, I'll leave my phone in another room so I'm not being distracted or have this tendency to pick it up and look, go on social media and see, oh, did I miss anything? So it's those little things you can kind of do, or at least I try to do, to build that presence into my life.
Hmm.
And just one of the other things, meditations really helped me. And by far, I've really struggled to get to the point where I can say I can consistently meditate, because that's a challenge in itself. But I try to target, meditation before going to sleep and meditating first thing in the morning, and that allows me to like disconnect from my phone as well.
Hmm.
Uh, and Again, it brings me to the present. So if I'm being consumed by thoughts or anything that's happened during the day, I'm able to disconnect from that. And one of the things I recently heard from Jay Shetty, he said in one of in a podcast he was being interviewed, is he erases anything that happened the day before and starts fresh every morning. And I thought that was amazing, as
That's
hard as
brilliant.
it is. But
Yeah.
just, even if you can try to attempt to do that, I think there's so much power in that, because now you're starting every day fresh, you're present, and whatever happened, right? You're almost
Yeah.
like um being born again every day. It's your chance. Like, yeah, whatever mistakes you made, whatever other people did to you, you're leaving all that behind and you're giving every day a fresh opportunity. So anyways, that's my long-winded answer, but yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And kind of alongside that, ending your day and sort of wrapping up, not having, recognizing you may not wake the next day. There is a sort of recognition that you're settling your debts, you're taking care of what you need to take care of on any given day, um, and you're setting yourself up to start fresh each day. And I feel
Yeah.
like so much of our energy, so much of my energy is focused on reliving past experiences. And to some extent, there's some value to being able to have this sort of after action review where you can articulate what am I going to do differently in my next experience that might be similar to this. Um, but I think, at least I can speak for me and for many of the men with whom I work, there is a tendency to take it to a next level, to ruminate over past experiences, to relive them, to worry about
Yep.
future ones, even when they haven't happened or they won't happen. And so recognizing that staying in the present, simple as it is, hard as it can be, is in essence allowing you uh, to just attend to what is currently happening, what you actually have some say over. The
Hmm.
past is gone, the future may not happen. Um, it's pretty powerful. I think there are forces within us that keep us from staying put. Curiosity, um, wonderment,
Hmm. Hmm.
attempts to control. And at the same time, there is a recognition, at least within Stoic philosophy, of um, seeing all of those things as limited, totally limited. Um, that we may not be able to control squat by thinking
Hmm.
about um, how I'm going to show up 2 days from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's important, just to kind of expand on the whole past experiences. I'd say I'm a chronic ruminator.
yeah, me
So
too.
I've ruminated. Well, it's something I've been working on, and hopefully I feel like I'm getting better at it. And one of the experiences that
Same.
happened recently, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I had some dream where it was like a past experience, and I woke up, and for me, the way it works is quite often it happens when I'm in the middle of the night, and whether I'm trying to fall asleep or if I wake up, and then my mind will immediately start listing all the people that, in the past that may have wronged me. And I'll
Mm.
ruminate and get upset about it. And I can feel it in my body. And then I can't go back to sleep because the thoughts are just coming in so quick. And I remember that specific night. So for the last month or so, I've been really focusing on my sleep patterns and getting quality sleep. So that was a goal of mine. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and those thoughts are rushing in. And I could feel that again, that same tightness in my body and that anger and resentment coming in. And I paused and I told myself, I'm not going to let this ruin my sleep tonight. So I did like a
Mm.
breathing exercise, cleansed my mind, and luckily I was able to go back to sleep and started the day fresh, and that was huge for me. And I think a lot of people struggle with that rumination, and the reason why I'm telling this story is um, because for someone like me to be able to do that, I feel like most people can do that if they really put in that time and effort in the moment. But at the same time, recognize that we have so much power within ourselves to not let those thoughts consume us. Like we can
Mm.
actually um, and put an end to it if we really put our mind to it. So so I think going back to the aspect of stoicism, we have that innate ability within ourselves to really choose a different direction, have that choice. Things, situations, circumstances are going to happen to us. They're out of our control, but the choice we have is in our control, right? And choosing different is always in our control.
Most certainly. That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of like uh, bring this conversation full circle and kind
Yeah.
of conclude here, for people that are either watching or even ourselves, like you and I, as kind of men living in this modern world, we've talked about, anger. We've talked about wisdom. We've talked about not letting other circumstances or situations consume us and dictate how we show up in this world. What are some other things we can do as a community of men based on these philosophies? Because obviously they worked back then, so why can't they
Yeah.
work today? And just want to get your thoughts, and then we can
Yeah.
continue from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think there are a few things um, to add to the list you just said. Uh, Looking back to what we've described and what you described around surrounding yourself with the people who are going to lift you up, building community is really important. And I think that part of the reason why looking at Stoicism as a philosophy that may drive us in the modern age around masculinity is that even though it sort of shares the moniker with the name with sort of little s stoicism, which suggests kind of tamping down emotion, showing no sort of degree of weakness or vulnerability. That's not really what the philosophy entails.
Correct.
Um, that the philosophy very much attracts awareness to our inner experiences, to naming them, to recognizing that our emotions emerge in the way that they do, and that our thoughts may reflexively take us to negative places or the future or the past. Um, to be aware to them, to work through them, not to be owned by them. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps that's the share quite often with with tenets of Buddhism and the experience of meditation and mindfulness, being aware to what's emerging in the moment, and also recognizing that in the moment you are not those thoughts, you are not those feelings. You can return awareness to the present moment. Um, that you don't have to necessarily control the future or the past or things that are out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
And also a recognition too that suffering happens, that without it, we're not able to showcase our own personal experiences, that if we're too comfortable without striving towards something within our lives, that perhaps we don't get to showcase the best parts of who we are. And so I'd add to your list a recognition of staying in the moment, staying present, building community,
Yep.
being aware to our emotions, recognizing that being aware to them, naming them, sharing them with other people doesn't mean that we're beholden to them.
Right.
In fact, it makes us less prisoner to them by naming them, by experiencing them, rather than trying to stagnate them or suppress them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think just to kind of expand on the suffering, it's interesting, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, we want to avoid pain because, it's just, it's
sucks.
hard. Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah,
Exactly. But I think when we are in those situations, it really also allows us to be humble. Now, you can have a choice. You can either sit there and blame the circumstances, the situations, other people, or you can look within yourself and understand, okay, well, what can I do different? If we didn't have those moments of suffering or pain, we will really never have an opportunity to question ourselves, be curious, challenge ourselves to do things differently. And I think, I mean, as much as it sucks, I think those moments are transformational and truly allow our growth, right? And I find like when we get angry, we're shifting that focus externally. We're saying, oh, I'm angry because this happened. It was this person's fault, or it was this. But when we take a pause and we understand what's the source of the anger and look inside, it's an opportunity for us to do different, and maybe look at what are the things we've been doing, what are our patterns, what are our behaviors that led us here to begin with, and how can we transform ourselves that to because pain and suffering is going to happen, but how can we transform ourselves so we can handle it better?
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, beautifully said. It reminds me of a lot of my big chunk of my work of late, or at least before 2020, mid 2020, was working on palliative care services, and so there were the work entailed um, treating patients with treating people with long-standing life-limiting illness or acute illness that's likely um, to lead to death in the near future. And in many cases, there were um, lots of end-of-life discussions. There were um, unexpected changes that led to a dramatic shift in the timeline of one's own life. And I think when I have had conversations in the past about this sort of work, I'm always met with this question of, well, that must have been, wasn't that really depressing? Or that must have been really, um, that must have been really awful. How did you maneuver seeing that day in and day out? And in reality, yes, there were uh, many hardships. It was difficult to see people of all ages um, come to the tail end of life. And also, uh, I realized that was balanced with a tremendous amount of beauty and joy and love, and that I I don't think I experienced in any other realm of, certainly in any other realm of my work, but in any other realm of life.
mhm.
Going into work wasn't depressing, but sitting in traffic, dealing with the realities of daily life without an awareness that our lives may come to a close, um, that in itself is a form of suffering.
Mhm.
And so there's some joy to being able to have difficult conversations, being able to endure challenging circumstances, and to do that with love and community, and dignity and grace.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the aspect of community is important. And I think to expand on something you and I both said, you mentioned surrounding ourselves with people that will lift us up, and it's important. And I think there's an aspect of guilt and shame that comes in when we prioritize our time or the people that we want to spend time with. And I think for me, one of the biggest things I started noticing is when I'm around people that are not enabling my growth or are not aligned with my values or my purpose in life, I really start feeling that energy, like it's like an energy suck. And I find like I have to do more self-care after spending time like that, whether it's gossiping or just having a negative outlook on life. Even if I'm not participating in the conversation or I'm getting sucked into it, I could feel like a drain on my energy levels, and after the fact, I just feel worse. So the reason why I'm saying this is, I've started prioritizing my time, and if I feel like it's not going to add value or it's not going to enable my growth or my purpose, I'm going to shy away or I'm going to limit the amount of time I spend around those people. And I don't feel bad about it because at the end of the day, everything we've talked about, the time here is limited. Present time is limited, and we have to be very mindful of how we spend it. And if it's not aligning with our values, then maybe question that and really ask yourself, okay, like, is this the right thing for me?
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. As I think we've definitely had this conversation outside of
Yeah.
these
Yes.
fora, but I found myself too really limiting certain relationships that somehow, even if I don't find myself necessarily acting in a particular way differently, there is an energy that's associated with you know, being in the presence of extreme pessimism or narcissism, as we've discussed a bit of in the past, that that doesn't build us up. And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, much as I think, especially for men, there is a sense of feeling, for many of us, feeling um, quite isolated, perhaps alone. Um, there is some recognition that our time and our presence are important, and that we get to judge um, with whom and how we spend that time. And and so I found myself very frequently looking at relationships and identifying whether um, they are positive in some way or detracting and really limiting. And it's not easy. I'm not. No, I think some of those relationships are familial, some are very long standing, and there may
Right.
not be a way to just sort of cut it, cut them out. And at the same
Right.
time, there are certainly ways to create the types of boundaries that allow for our own growth and health. Yeah, and Nate mentioned this is just that's a distillation of the book Essentialism, which is a really great book, and I think it's by Greg McKeown, and maybe worth also our naming a few books that might, or a few sources that might help to um, help listeners to learn more about Stoicism and how that might
Yep.
relate. But that's a great one. Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we've referenced Meditations by Marcus Aurelius a few times. So
Yeah,
that's the one kind of that inspired me in that sense to have this conversation today too. So yeah, yeah, no, I think Pierre, to your point, I think the relationships we really need to have a look. I think often we do get to a point, and I struggle with it. Like family for me is very important. So I'll definitely like that one is hard to cut out to your point, but I'm very honest, and to your point, boundaries, right? Like,
yeah,
whether it's my siblings or my parents, like if I feel like they're uh, talking about things that I don't necessarily want to be a part of, I'll tell them that. I'll be like, hey, if you want to have this conversation, by all means have it, but just don't have it around me. And if you want me to time you guys of having those conversations in front of me. So I think we can put those boundaries, and if we continue to cross those boundaries, then that in its an answer for you. So yeah,
yeah. That's important. I appreciate that. I appreciate that in particular, uh, being here with family at the moment. We're sort of celebrating a joint kind of holiday early, as probably won't be back until um, sometime in mid to late January. But I realized too just how important boundary setting and how difficult boundary setting can be within our own familial situations. And I mean that's something that we can uh, maybe
yeah,
something we can touch upon at a later live.
yeah. Well, absolutely, we can touch on it. I'm
Yeah,
sure
that
it'll
would be great.
trigger a lot of emotions for people,
Oh my gosh. Yes.
and it sounds like us included.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sweating just thinking about it. But yes, most definitely.
And it's, especially with the holidays coming around, I see it with people. So I'm fortunate in the sense I don't have a lot of pressure in that
Yeah.
sense, but I see it with a lot of people. There's so much anxiety going into the holiday
Yeah.
season because it's like, oh, well, I need to see my in-laws, I need to see my parents, I need to see this member of my family that I don't necessarily get along with. So maybe, yeah, it is worth a discussion, but because I definitely see it with a lot of people I have relationships with where they're just anxious going into it and they cannot wait for the holidays to end. And I think the holidays
Yeah.
are a great time to reset and unwind, and we should not be anxious about it. So Yeah, just
Yeah.
my
I
thoughts.
mean, that's sort of like a holiday of joy, uh, perhaps. And yet there's so much other stuff that that's piled on it. And to your point, expectations and pressures and and fears. And so, yeah, I'd be game for that if you want to look at touching upon the stressors of the holidays in the next couple of times.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Sounds like
Well,
a plan, man.
all right. Well, Pierre, thanks for doing this today. I
For
know,
Con,
you know,
thank you.
you're traveling, and I enjoy these conversations, and again, appreciate everyone that is engaged, tuning in, especially on a Sunday. So always appreciate the engagement and people that provide their own insights. So any
Likewise.
final thoughts, Pierre,
Yeah, no,
before we?
thank you very much for always setting this up, um, and thank you to all who joined and who are watching after the fact. You can always reach out to either of us with recommendations, suggestions for topics, or recommendations for shifting, adding, removing, continuing in any way. Just let us know.
Absolutely. And always, contact us if you have any thoughts, or if you feel like maybe we missed something, because obviously we're figuring this out as we go too. So
Yeah, most
yeah.
certainly. Most certainly. Thank you for Con. Thank you for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I'll let you get back to the
All right,
family
man.
here.
I'll talk to you soon. Bye, Fer.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Nate.